Welcome to our Alumni Nutrition Talks series, a celebration of 40 years of training nutritional therapists. I'm Heather Rosa, the Dean, and I hope you enjoy this presentation.
Hi, my name's Layla and I'm a registered nutritional practitioner. Today I'm going to be talking about heart health and I'm going to give you a bit of background as to why I've become so fascinated and specialised really now in this subject of heart health. So to take it back a step, my father actually passed away in his mid-60s of heart failure, heart disease. And so for me, that's very young, especially these days, to be, dying of heart disease. But the issue is, and not many people know this, is that heart disease is the number one biggest killer worldwide. So cardiovascular disease is the number one biggest killer worldwide, and that's for both men and women. Now, unfortunately, men are disproportionately affected by cardiovascular disease than women, although that trend does change slightly as women go through the menopause, which can also increase their chances of cardiovascular issues. So I have, over the last couple of years in my nutritional practice, been looking into my own heart health and wanting to have a few checks done, run a few tests, see if I can really work on that area. So a lot of the time in nutrition, we're thinking about gut health, of nutrition, nutrient status, nourishing our bodies, what we're eating, our skin health, our weight, for example. And this is all really, really, really important. The problem with heart health is that we can't see our heart and we can't feel when there's a problem. It's something that happens very, very slowly over time. And so this is the concern and this is the danger, I think. And especially if there's been a family history of any sort, or if anyone has any sort of heart-related symptoms or concerns, then people should consider getting their cardiovascular health checked. And there are many, many, many ways that people can get their cardiovascular heart health checked. And I'm going to be talking about some of those today. So the other thing that I really got into a couple of years ago was the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio and the importance of omega-3. And this really does also relate to heart health. Now, there's been a lot of controversy in the news and the nutrition literature about omega-3 and actually more so about omega-6 and whether or it is pro-inflammatory or not, whether we need to reduce it or not. And there is still some conflicting advice over the omega-6s, which I'll come on to. But this to go in at a very sort of top line, really, on this, talking about omega-3, and then we're going to delve a bit deeper into the lipids. So omega-3 comes from oily fish, and actually it comes from EPA and DHA, which is created from algae. So it's found in algae. So algae is the ultimate source. The fish eat the algae and they store in their livers, in their bodies, in their flesh, EPA and DHA. Now, these are called essential fatty acids, and actually ALA is an essential fatty acid, and there are some essential omega-6s as well as EPA and DHA. So ALA is the plant form. Now, we can eat that from plants. We can get it from plant sources, but it's poorly converted into EPA and DHA. And EPA and DHA are particularly anti-inflammatory. They have many systemic benefits around the body, heart health, brain health, skin, immune system, anti-inflammatory, like I say. So it's on a very individualized case-by-case basis. So I've run lots of tests, and I see vegans who are only consuming ALA, who have good amounts of EPA and DHA, but I see it the other way around. I also see meat eaters who aren't getting enough of the oily fish, the EPA and the DHA. And the research does show that good quality, good levels of omega-3 fatty acids are particularly beneficial for your heart health. And there are lots of reasons for this. It can help with heart regulation. It's very anti-inflammatory, so it helps with the arterial wall and the inflammation, which I'm going to talk about. And then the other issue, like I mentioned, is the omega-6s. So linoleic acid is actually an essential fatty acid, so we do need to get that. Now, we've got to think about the omega-6s and think about seed oils. So seed oils are what we might call mass produced. They're not actually classed as an ultra-processed food item, but they are found in a lot of ultra-processed foods. And so this then became another big topic of mine. So I have presented on the big issue of ultra-processed foods and on men's health in particular as well. Because by default, if we are reducing or removing our intake of ultra-processed foods, then we are going to be reducing our intake of things such as additives, preservatives, sugars, sweeteners, refined carbohydrates, seed oils, potentially, if they are a problem. And so if we steer more to this real Mediterranean diet, which sounds really simple, but it is actually really effective, then we're going to be helping our health in a lot of ways. And so this is how this then led me into really deep diving into what are the biochemical pathways to disease from ultra-processed food intake. And again, it led me back to heart health. So cardiovascular disease seemed to be one of the main concerns when it comes to eating or overeating ultra-processed foods. So some of the main biochemical pathways to disease from overconsumption of ultra-processed foods come from the fact that they are very calorific, they're low nutrient dense but high calorie dense. And so research has shown that people who overconsume ultra-processed foods in a trial ate around 500 calories more per day than those on a whole foods Mediterranean-style diet. So therefore, we have the issue of possible obesity, which obesity then puts a burden on the body. So obesity might be the overriding issue here when it comes to ultra-processed foods. And obesity can cause inflammation, dysregulation in hormones, and it can also cause issues with potential type 2 diabetes. Now, type 2 diabetes is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. And so we can start to see here how everything links, everything is, one thing can lead to the other in a cascade of events, and how really it's this whole sort of metabolic milieu that's all very much interconnected. This took me down the avenue again with the men's health. And I find it really fascinating that actually we've got this picture between obesity, inflammation, cardiovascular disease, low testosterone, high estrogen, high visceral fat, that fat around the middle. And this, again, this sort of perpetuating cycle of issues, which can further lead to disruption to the vascular lining, endothelial dysfunction, and again, potentially cardiovascular issues. And so it's how we sort of, look under the hood and start to analyze and start to work out, is someone presenting with any of these issues at all? And if they are, how can we start to advise and guide people around how to pick this apart and what to work on first? So sometimes, for example, I will have someone come to me and they may have been given some blood results which show that they have both high cholesterol and high blood glucose, because the two are very closely intertwined. You don't normally get one without the other. Therefore, they look online and they get very confused about, what shall I do then? Shall I reduce sugars or shall I reduce saturated fat? And if I do both, what is there left for me to eat? So it can leave people feeling really confused also about what to do from a dietary perspective. So this then led me on to find a fantastic test from doctors' data. And it's one that I run time and time again in my clinic. And I first found this test because I actually first ran it on myself, because obviously I was doing this research partly for myself as well as my clients. So the test is called the cardiometabolic profile test from doctors' data. It can be run through Regenerous, and I present a webinar for Regenerous on this very topic. So again, it's something I've really deep dived into because I find it absolutely fascinating. And this is the point where I hope I don't bore people too much with how excited I am about these markers, because I will explain them. So when you have your standard lipid panel done with the doctor, with an NH doctor or even a private doctor, it's great. It is going to tell you whether there's an issue or not, but it's still quite top line. And the marker that we're still looking at is total cholesterol. And if someone's total cholesterol is 5 or over, then a doctor might say, okay, well, it's just a little bit over 5, maybe it's 5.5 or something like that. Go away, see a nutritionist, work on your diet, work on your lifestyle, and come back in 3 or 6 months' time and we'll retest, and then we'll consider whether medication is necessary. Now, if someone's total cholesterol is over, possibly over 7, I mean, it's changing all the time, but possibly over 7, then statins would be strongly advised. Now, it's up to that person, obviously, which route they take. The issue that I have with the total cholesterol, it's not an issue, but the issue I do have with the total cholesterol is the fact that it's not telling you exactly which types of bad cholesterol someone has that are raised. And so this really got my mind thinking, and especially when I was enlightened to the cardiometabolic profile, it really does give you a much deeper dive and a deeper look at this. So it's a one-pager, so it's just one page of about 25 markers. And what it looks at in more detail is the subspecies of LDL. So LDL is what's known as your bad cholesterol. HDL is known as your good cholesterol. So cholesterol is made in the liver, and the bad cholesterol, we'll call it, moves around the bloodstream, and essentially the good cholesterol's there to drag it away and reprocess it back to the liver. Things like fiber, again, omega-3 fatty acids can help support the HDL process. Now, what really got me was the fact that there's a subspecies of LDL called Lp(a). And Lp(a) is not in the standard lipid profile. Yet 25% of people carry the genes for raised Lp(a). And Lp(a) is very sticky, it's very atherogenic, so it's very much more likely to cause cardiovascular issues than other types of LDL. So this is one of the key subspecies that I was really fascinated with. I've tested my blood results, as I've mentioned, and luckily I don't have raised Lp(a), which was a big relief. But I will see clients with very high Lp(a), and they previously had no idea that there was this genetic LDL. They may have even been on statins, which was hugely reducing their other bad cholesterols. They're in the green. But statins medication currently does not work on Lp(a). And this is something that a lot of people don't know. So there is currently no medication. I am in talks with a cardiologist at the moment, and in a couple of years' time, we may see some medication for Lp(a), but it's not there at the moment. It has been suggested again that increasing your intake of oily fish and or, supplementing with EPA and DHA can support or reduce Lp(a) to a certain extent. And there has also been some research about the use of niacin, which is a B vitamin, to help to reduce Lp(a). So that's a really key marker. And I'm actually quite surprised that it's not on the standard lipid panel. I'm not sure why it's not there. So then if we go deeper down into this, I'm talking about these subspecies, you've got bad cholesterol, but then you've got two other types of cholesterol that is checked using this advanced cardiometabolic panel. And one of them is SDLDL and one of them is OX or oxidized SDL. So SDLDL is small, dense. So you've got your big, fluffy LDLs or lipid molecules that are kind of big and fluffy like a cloud. They sort of float around. They don't cause a lot of damage. They're not sticky. They're not oxidized. But then processes such as diet can turn LDLs into these harder golf-like ball LDLs, small, dense LDLs, like a golf ball. They may start to bang around and cause damage to the vascular lining. Then you've also got oxidized LDLs. You can imagine things like overconsumption of glucose, sugar, alcohol, toxins, lifestyle, stress can cause the LDL particles to become oxidized. And oxidization of anything is generally not good. So again, we're checking for, okay, there may be raised cholesterol, there may be raised LDL, but of that, is your Lp(a) raised? Is your SDLDL raised? Is your oxidized LDL raised? Hopefully not. And what's your HDL doing? Your good cholesterol, making sure that's high enough. The test, a standard lipid panel, and this test does look at HDL, obviously, the ratios, and triglycerides, which is really important as well. Triglycerides is another form of fat that is stored in the body, and it can come from the overconsumption of fats and sugars. So the test then goes into the inflammatory markers. And this is really important because the way I like to describe this to my clients is that inflammation is a key underlying driver when it comes to cardiovascular disease. So things such as toxins, viruses, sugar, stress, any damage that can seep through into that vascular lining and cause the immune system to then go to the site and try to gobble up these things that shouldn't be there, it can cause damage to the arterial wall. It's inflammation, it's damage. So there you've got this damage. It might be from overconsumption of glucose. There might be a virus, stress, like I said, the immune system overreacting. And this bad cholesterol comes along and it sees the damage and it sticks like a plaster. And it keeps sticking like a plaster. And this is where this build-up starts to happen over many, many years. So I say to my clients, yes, there may be a build-up of cholesterol and it was found at the scene of the crime, but it didn't actually do the crime. We need to look further upstream to see what caused the inflammation. And this is where this test checks for a couple of markers. It checks for plaque activity, which is a new and emerging marker. I'm actually not sure how robust that marker is because, again, like I say, I'm in contact with a cardiologist on this one. But it does give an indication as to we've all got plaque. Of that plaque, how stable is it? How likely is it to break away? So it's a marker for inflammation. It also checks for high sensitivity CRP. So CRP is a marker for systemic inflammation, and that can rise if you have a cold, a fever, a bout of exercise, stress, something you've eaten. But high sensitivity CRP is more of a long-term underlying chronic inflammatory marker. So if this is raised, we're thinking, okay, we need to work, like I say, upstream to start to reduce any inflammation. And we've also got homocysteine. So homocysteine is to do with methylation at the DNA level, and it's to do with the wheels of the cogs turning and creating all these different molecules. And if there's not enough of the B vitamins, then B vitamins are needed to flush out homocysteine. If there's not enough of the B vitamins, homocysteine builds up. Homocysteine is, again, inflammatory to the arterial wall. It's a really simple fix. So I keep coming back to the omega-3s, the B vitamins, all of these lovely things that we recommend in clinic anyway. So we can check for that. Now, the reason it's called a cardiometabolic test is because it's cardiovascular for the first half of the markers, and then it's metabolic. So the second part is looking at metabolism, which is really, really important. So someone would have had their HbA1c tested, no doubt. I don't know why HbA1c isn't on this test. I think I might speak to the lab and say, can they please add that marker? Because it's always something we need to retest. But this is looking at a more sensitive range. So HbA1c is a marker for the amount of glucose on your blood cells from the previous 3 to 4 months. So it's a very good gauge to what your dietary patterns have been like and how raised your blood glucose is. So the cardiometabolic profile looks at insulin, it looks at fasting glucose, and it also looks at a marker called glycomark. Glycomark, again, is a marker for how much glucose has entered the system. We don't want too much of this. So in the case of diabetes or, pre-diabetes, I might see really raised glucose, raised insulin, glycomark. It's obviously a strong signal that the insulin and the blood glucose pathways are struggling. What a doctor will say, once someone has been diagnosed with diabetes, so once their HbA1c is 48 or over, they will always be classed as diabetic. Yet there are lifestyle and dietary interventions that can take place to reduce someone's blood glucose levels to a healthier range. One of the first things that I will put in place will be the use of a continuous blood glucose monitor that someone will wear on their arm for 2 weeks. So wearing the blood glucose on their arm for 2 weeks, they can start to track in real time what their blood glucose is doing, try to keep it in the green, watch out for if it's going hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic, and see what's spiking it or what's dropping it and start to make those dietary changes. This can be a really powerful tool for lots of people when they start to go on this journey of reducing or reversing even type 2 diabetes. The other thing, this is a really simple trick for people, is to start scanning food items. So this goes back to the big issue of ultra-processed foods. So I recommend an app called the Yucca app. A lot of my clients and community go wild for this app. It's been really revolutionary for a lot of people, really life-changing. People are really shocked, actually, when they pick up a product that says something like high in protein, 1 of your 5 a day or whatever. Scan the barcode with one of these apps. Yucca's really easy to use. Straight away it will come up the sugars, the sugar content, the fat content, the calories, additives, sweeteners. Of those additives, which ones are hazardous? And it makes you either do one of 3 things, I guess. Go, oh, that's a nice surprise. It's fine. Or that's absolutely terrible. I'm going to put it back on the shelf and never eat it again. Or it's not great. I really want it. So I'm going to try and find a like-for-like product that's not so full of rubbish. Because again, that inflammation, sugars, but also additives and preservatives are not going to be helping with that inflammatory pathway that I mentioned. So these are some of the things that can come from the report, as well as it does also check leptin and adiponectin, which are hunger signals. So leptin is the I'm full signal, rather than ghrelin is the I'm hungry signal. So in the case of obesity, high sugar consumption, bad habits with eating, leptin can rise. And it can actually rise to, someone can actually become leptin resistant, a bit like insulin resistance. Now, low leptin can also happen if someone's very very physical, works out a lot, burning a lot of calories, leptin will also start to go the other way, so that person does feel more hungry. So it's a very fine-tuning balancing act. But certainly in the case of leptin resistance, this can also be a real eye-opener for some people who've maybe struggled with their weight, struggled with their cravings, struggled with sugar cravings for a long time, and think maybe they're just weak or they're greedy. And actually, if their leptin signals have switched off, then their hunger signals are out of balance, and they can't actually help that. So this is another, really powerful part of the test. And the test does also look at kidney functions. So it looks at creatinine, for example, because kidneys filtering the blood linked to heart health is also really important. So then what else can we take from this? So, it can be very powerful to make those dietary and lifestyle changes. Also, in the case of very highly raised cholesterol, this can be also, unfortunately, a good way for people to really see that actually they do need to refer back to their doctor. They may need to think about medication, because this kind of functional report is quite hard hitting. It's one page and it's not pulling any punches. The results are either in the green, in the amber, or in the red. And the report also comes with a lot of information at the back from research papers stating which markers are raised and how they're related to cardiovascular disease. So it's a lot for people to take on board. You really need to kind of reflect on this, and maybe it might be a wake-up call that a lot of people need. And I've certainly seen a lot of success with my clients who are working with me on their health in general, maybe on their weight loss, maybe on their type 2 diabetes journey. Maybe they've come to me because they're feeling tired. They think they've got low testosterone. There's lots of reasons why people come to me. And actually, a lot of the time, we do end up going down the route of looking at cardiovascular health. And a lot of the time, that might be because there's been a family history. Maybe there's been a scare. They know their diet's not great and they don't know what to do about it. So yes, saturated fat is something that we need to eat in moderation. It's maybe not the complete bad guy that it's been made out to be, but certainly saturated fat can increase bad cholesterol. So it can increase LDL. So that's something we do want to moderate for sure. Eggs, a lot of people ask me about eggs. So the amount of cholesterol from the diet or from foods that are found in the blood is actually much lower than we think. So much of the cholesterol that's being produced is being produced by our own bodies in the liver, and maybe not being flushed away correctly. So eggs really are okay, again, in moderation. They contain lots of good amino acids, nutrients, choline, and that's a question I get asked a lot. Fiber. So fiber is a really fantastic one. So fiber is obviously, we know that's good for your gut bacteria. But fiber, like I mentioned earlier, actually helps to support the production and the function of the HDL, the good cholesterol. So it acts as a mechanism to help to reduce LDL via supporting HDL, and the same with omega-3. So really increasing your fiber. So again, if we go back to the ultra-processed foods, if you're changing up your diet because you know you need to be healthier and you are going to start to reduce the consumption of ultra-processed foods, by default, you're now going to be eating more real food, or the real Mediterranean diet, which is going to include more fiber, good fats as well. So don't be so scared of fats. So avocados, olive oil, nuts and seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, real Greek yogurt, not Greek style yogurt. All of these good fats as well in moderation are also going to be beneficial. So we've got the fiber, we've got the good fats, we've got the good oils we talked about, and protein as well. So thinking about balancing blood sugar in all of this is absolutely key. So starting the day with a high protein breakfast is a great way to stop that blood sugar roller coaster from kicking off right from, the word go. You start with a higher protein breakfast and you get a smoother blood glucose response throughout the day. It's just generally better for you. It instigates muscle synthesis, and protein works with lots of other things as well, such as neurotransmitters in the brain. So you may feel that you actually feel better as well from increasing your protein intake. I think a lot of people don't realize they're actually suboptimal in the amount of protein that they should be eating per day. And they're good fats as well. And they are consuming maybe too many refined carbohydrates, which is very easy to do. And people also obviously ask me about time restricted eating. Now, that's on a case by case basis. Some men can certainly fast until lunchtime, and this can be really great for their blood glucose levels, their weight loss goals, their focus. Some women, particularly women, may find it harder and not so beneficial as women are heading into that perimenopause, menopause. Our hormones are a little bit more sensitive to these extremes, and so maybe fasting or time restricted eating isn't really going to help, because it may push cortisol up, which may dysregulate progesterone, which can offset estrogen, and we can end up in a bit of a negative cycle with our hormones. So it's really about doing what's best for our body to get the best balance. Me personally, I used to do time restricted eating. I'm now 45. I do a lot of exercise. I enjoy having breakfast again. So I have a high protein breakfast before I go do my workout, and it feels really good for me, for my body, for my time of life. So again, it's got to be very bespoke. It's got to be very personalised. But this is certainly some of the key aspects of what I have been discovering and what I have been working on these last couple of years in clinic. So, I absolutely love what I do. I love working with women and their hormones. I love working on gut health problems, skin problems, weight loss problems. But really, if we look at the heart health and think maybe it is a little bit of an area that hasn't quite had the spotlight that it needs, and it actually links into so many other aspects of our health. And if we go on a little journey, check in on our heart health, if we do have a reason, even if we don't have a reason, maybe now is the time to think, I'm going to give my hardworking heart some love back. So, I hope you have found my talk interesting. And if anyone has any questions, then please do get in touch.
If you enjoyed this presentation, then click on the link in the description to subscribe to our Nutrition Talks email list. And don't forget to click the like button and subscribe.